Hi, my name is Trae McMakin. I'm a fiddle player from China Township, Michigan, near the border of Canada on the St. Clair River in what's called the Blue Water area. And I grew up in a musical family. Both my parents were performing musicians. They performed on both sides of the border around the Great Lakes region. Both my older brothers were musicians. And growing up, it was expected in our family that you were a McMakin, so you were going to play an instrument. Now, when I was about 7 or 8, I remember, I was standing in the doorway to the living room of the Scott's family's home. Now, they were friends of our families, and we were visiting them for something or other that day. And I remember Eric and Emily Scott played the violin. They took their violins out, and they stood in the middle of the living room, and they started playing a Scottish fiddle tune. And I stood in the doorway and watched them, and I remember it clearly. I can even see the 1980s brown decor in the living room, the sunlight filtering through these brownish curtains, but I remember on Eric's face there was this smile, even like a smirk, and it was for nothing other than just the sheer enjoyment of playing that tune. And I told my mother later, I want to do that, I want to play that. And so they got me lessons with Emily, the older girl who was playing the fiddle tune, and that's how I started playing the fiddle, the violin. A lot of the old timers, they would call it a violin, they'd call it a fiddle. And so I got lessons from Emily and then from another teacher for many years, but it wasn't until I was around 13, that I first went to Canada, where I met many different fiddle players who began to teach me within the real tradition of fiddle playing. That would be Ontario old time, Quebecois, the French Canadian style, the Scottish and Irish fiddlers who would teach me. And I grew up learning from fiddlers who I met in Canada. And I would go to Canada every summer and learn, and then come back home onto my side of the river and work on it. And that's sort of how I learned. And I have a fiddle today that was belonged to my surrogate grandfather, and this was his father's fiddle. Now, Mr. Irvin, my surrogate grandfather, he didn't play the fiddle. But he did always dabble in music, and this was his. And I had played it sometimes growing up, because or at least sometime I had played it, and I knew Mr. Irvin because I used to work for him. I would go and I would help him split wood, help him cut wood, stack wood. Stacking wood to Mr. Irvin was an art form. To make a stack that would stand up for years. Now, he was the one who taught me how to do that. And he would write lumberjacking in the memo line of the checks that he would write me for helping him out. But he would teach me all sorts of things. And he was an eccentric, genius, creative, but very, very kind old man who lived out on the Black River in the woods near where I'm from. And he built his own house out of scrap materials. It had a catwalk way up high over the living room and a secret passageway. And I thought it was so neat. And a few years ago, he's quite old now, and he was downsizing, and he was getting rid of a number of his instruments. And I knew that this was his father's fiddle. And I went and I wanted to get it from him. And he was I was looking at it, and I said, Mr. Irvin, it needs a new set of strings. And he said, oh yeah, Trae, the last time I changed those strings was in 1933, which is when he had been learning to play as a child, and that had ended, and he played other things after that. But he was the first person who showed me a schottisch, the dance, the schottisch. I was talking about playing the fiddle, talking about music while we were working on something in his garage once when I was, I don't know how old I was. And he started to dance a schottisch. And he had remembered it from square dances and dances when he was young in Indiana. And he started to show me that. And I'm going to play a tune on it in a minute. But I started being interested in Michigan fiddling when I was older, and I had the freedom of travel. Particularly, I started to travel when I had my own car, travel around the state of Michigan, and I would research and I would read, but I also would just hit the road and go and meet people and meet old fiddlers. And I even had to sleep in my car a couple nights, but such was the way of it. I would travel all around the state and learn about the old music of Michigan. As I learned growing up about the music of Ontario and other places, I wanted to know how people played in Michigan. And there wasn't a lot of information available. So I started to research, and I started to study it, and I started to learn it. But it was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of travel, and it was a lot of just determination, I guess. But I love the music, and I'm going to play a tune now. This tune sort of represents a little bit of my personal journey with fiddling. It was taught to me by a French-Canadian man from the Sault Ste. Marie area, on the Canadian side of the Sault Ste. Marie, which is another twin city like near where I'm from. And he taught me this tune. His name was Pierre Schreier, and he called it Whitefish Over the Rapids. And I later learned that this tune was written by a man from the Michigan side of the river, a Native American man on one of the islands. And the whitefish used to run through the St. Mary's River near Sault Ste. Marie. And that's what the French fur traders and the native peoples would survive on. And the French would say it was the only fish that you could eat and never get sick of. And this fiddle tune is played in Michigan and is played in Ontario. And the unique thing about it, one of the unique things about the Michigan tradition too, is that we play in B-flat major. And this tune's in B-flat major. And that's not weird for a Michigan fiddler, a lot of them. But some other places it's quite strange. But this is how the tune goes, Whitefish Over the Rapids.